Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Smash Pod, brought to you by Smashup Fantasy Sports, the only next-gen fantasy sports game where you can choose your players, choose your cards, and then dominate your opponents. I'm your boy, Chef, your host as always. I'm also with my co-host, Hawk, always riding shotgun with me. What's up, Hawk? How's it going?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk about some data here tonight.
Yeah, we got a special edition of this episode for you all today. We're going to dive into some data and insights on our recent Smashup tourney. So we'll look up the public tourney results from week 2. So we're going to look at things like top cards, top players, some player combinations. So we're going to dive into all that. We're going to put on our data hats and just like geek out. So you ready for that?
Do it.
All right, let's do it. Before I jump into that, though, just want to remind everyone, our free public tourneys, once again, are open. So dive in. You get 3 lineups that you can actually apply towards the contest. If you refer a friend, you get a 4th. So you can just have a bunch of fun playing Smash Up Fantasy Sports. It's a wide open tourney. Top prize is, what, $1,000 this week?
Yep, $1,000.
Yeah. So it's like a lottery ticket, but it's a lottery ticket that you can have while playing fantasy football and just have fun doing so. So just jump in and give it a shot, right? Like you may
Get
win
a free lottery ticket, right? You don't have to pay for this lottery ticket. It doesn't even
it.
cost you
Exactly.
money.
Completely free. Speaking of winning a lottery ticket, let's look at the top 3 scorers from week 2, the Fantasy Frenzy public tournament. So why don't I jump in and share some of that here? So let's take a look. I have some of the data. And the top 3 scores here, let's see over here. The top 3 scores are Cup of Destruction with 193.2, Captain Meow Meow, Captain Meow Meow with 190.9, and Colby Conway 190.2. Really, really close scores there, really stacked up against each other at the top. But I guess that's going to be the case when you're maximizing all these scores. Man, I don't think I've hit anything close to this thus far in the league play or tournament play. Have you gotten close to this?
No, not yet. But all I can think about is that, like, Cup of Noodles should probably like rebrand as Cup of Destruction. It's like Liquid Death, right? Just sounds so much cooler.
Cup of Destruction. That's what I think of when I read that.
Eat a little ramen. I'm gonna eat my Cup of Destruction tonight.
Yeah, or just like the ramen cup is just like boiling hot and just burns your face. But hey, why don't we check out the lineup from Cup of Destruction in week 2? Maybe we can talk through it and show the watchers and then talk through to the listeners what that lineup looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up their lineup and let's see who they played, what cards they played, what combos we have here. So let's take a look. All right. So for those who are listening, Cup of Destruction's winning lineup had Kyler Murray at QB, Derrick Henry at running back, Ramondre Stevenson had a great game last week, not so much tonight. Rashee Rice at wide receiver, DK Metcalf, Trey McBride at tight end, Marvin Harrison. Ooh, he had such a good week last week. In the flex, Joey Sly as kicker, and then Seattle D. Just really quickly, we saw a couple of cards being stacked. Chris, why don't we talk through some of those cards that Cup of Destruction played?
So the way he played his cards this week, he did more of a distribution as opposed to stacking all his cards. So he did starting quarterback on Kyler Murray, which worked out really well. Starting running back on Derrick Henry, and then he scored 30 additional points by putting Speed Demon on DK Metcalf, who did catch a long pass. 52 card points all in all. Now, what's interesting is some people have stacked multiple cards in a player. We actually can see, if you look at Cup of Destruction's lineup, he did more of a team stack. So he took 3 Cardinals. For those of you not familiar with the term, stack means to take multiple players from the same team because there's a correlation. So like he had McBride and Harrison. So what happens is every time that Kyler throws a touchdown to them, he doubles up because he gets the points from Kyler and he gets the points for McBride and Harrison. That can be risky in league play, but in a weekly tournament where you want to get like the high score, it's a pretty good gamble.
Yeah, you got that big boom upside, and Harrison and McBride went off last week because the Cardinals just smoked the Rams. So the stacking of players on one team is a popular DFS strategy in tournament play. So you can see that strategy applied there. And the big one, though, was just like you said, the DK with the Speed Demon. DK had 48.9 total points, player points plus card points there. And that really carried his team. But also Kyler Murray just had a big day again, 42.8 points there. So really great lineup. He hit on a lot of players, 141 points from players, 52 card points, with a total of 193 and just barely edged out some of the others there. So just really, really great lineup from Cup of Destruction.
Yeah, fantastic job. So Cup of Destruction, You earned your $1,000, but now we are all coming for you. We're learning from your greatness.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's dive into some of the other insights from the rest of the tournament, top players overall, and what they did from a player and card standpoint. I think this is really interesting to see, what the popular and thematic plays were from last week, at least. Sorry. Some of these may carry over from week to week. Some of these may just be a weekly play based on matchups. But let's start up with the top players that we saw in the top 20 week 2 lineups. Chris, why don't you talk through some of the themes or some of the patterns that you see here from this list of top players?
Yeah, I think I'll call out three themes. I'm curious if you see anything else. One is just defenses. I think a lot of players here, unlike Cup of Destruction, who actually did not get that much from Seattle, they nailed great defenses. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves to list on the right, but they were probably stacking cards in the defenses. So that's one popular strategy so far. Two is just picking the right receiver. This is less of a great strategy and more that a lot of the other top receivers didn't have great weeks. Obviously, Tyreek played poorly. Amon-Ra got hurt. He had a pretty good week, but not the greatest. CeeDee Lamb, on the other hand, was his normal great self. And then just value plays. So guys like Jordan Mason,
Yeah, big time.
prices came out before it was announced that CMC was going the IR. Dobbins is still at a low price. I think the ability to hunt and find value is huge.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if it's the top 20 lineups, we're going to see guys who hit, right? So that's obvious. But I think what's interesting to see is you don't see a lot of quarterbacks, but the quarterbacks you see are the running quarterbacks, right? And so the quarterbacks that can scramble and get points from, I'm trying not to look to the list to the right, but you could see things like scramble spikes or just the fact that they're getting points from rushing, whereas the traditional pocket passing QBs, they're definitely not scoring high there. So I'm with you, man. It looks like the defenses are super popular. They're part of the top lineups. It'll be interesting to see if people continue to use this strategy. I mean, as long as the pricing's there, we'll talk about prices in a little bit. As long as the pricing value is there, I can see this trend continuing. But it's one of those things where if you pick a defense and they don't hit, you're not going to score very many points. So you've got to nail that defense right.
And that's one thing you don't see here actually is a very popular play defense this week was the Dallas Cowboys. I think they were played by, I think the Baltimore Ravens were played by a lot. So they were two of the top played players, particularly for defenses, but they're not on the list here. Because I want to go back to something else you said. I think you mentioned something interesting, which is because it's the top 20, these people picked a lot of players who hit. And this is already something I'm learning because so far I've done a great job of picking players who miss. And so what I'm learning for next week is I need to pick the
Bold
players
strategy.
who do
Bold
well.
strategy, Hawk.
It's a learning, we're all on a journey. And so part of my journey is figuring that out.
Yeah, and something not maybe associated directly to these lineups, but when you're picking your players, right, and you're thinking about strategy, some people think through like, do I try to fit in as many maybe like above average players as possible, or do I go like studs and duds? Do I go for like the really expensive, highly projected individuals and then just fill in the remaining roster spots with like really, really inexpensive guys, or maybe not even fill a roster spot at all because I've spent way too much money across the board. So that's something to think about as players are filling out their lineups. All right, let's cruise on over to the right. And so let's take a look at the top cards in the top 20 week 2 lineups. So again, Hawk, tell me what you're seeing and some of the trends and themes that you think are percolating through 2 weeks so far.
Yeah, the main thing I'm seeing here is just a ton of defensive stacking, right?
Yeah.
This is bang bang, takeaway card, defense wins championship, goal in one, necessary roughness. And in fact, starting running back, I think part of the reason you see it there is that if you've played a couple of defensive cards, it's one of the cheaper other cards. So I think it's something people are fitting into the rest of their budget. Although interesting, a couple like Home Field Advantage and Mr. Relevant, Mr. Relevant being kind of a parlay card where quarterback needs to get a certain number of passing and rushing yards. And then Home Field Advantage, one of our team cards, where actually for players who play at home, they get about a 25% bonus to their score. So interesting that there are some alternate strategies, but it seems like it's very defensive heavy.
I think so far through 2 weeks of the season, like there's not a lot of offense, right? Which probably means there's been a disproportionate amount of defense. So maybe that's also just something that's paralleling what's going on in the NFL through 2 seasons. So that's kind of interesting to see so far. And then, when you're looking at the different cards that are being used here, there's the kind of boomer bust cards, right? So Speed Demon is one of them. That I guess is in the top 20, but it was only used twice. And then Unstoppable Freight Trainer is another one that's kind of boomer bust. You've got to apply that to a player who rushes for 40 yards or more. So those boomer bust ones, if you hit, they're actually going to be part of probably a winning lineup.
Interesting. You can pick a great defense. You can also chase a bad offense. So you see 9 people pick the LA Chargers defense on the left-hand side. They were playing Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. Now, you're not going to have Bryce Young to beat up next week, as we discussed in the last pod. But
yeah,
clearly players were heat-seeking for the Carolina Panthers, and we'll see if Andy Dalton brings a bit of stability or if the Raiders' relative incompetence manages to. What happens when a stoppable force meets a movable object?
I think it's immovable force meets a...
No, not in this case. No, the phrase is unstoppable force meets an immovable object. In this case, it's a stoppable force
Got
meets
it.
immovable objects.
Well, who's the new Carolina? Is it the Giants?
I mean, to be fair, it still might be Carolina, but Daniel Jones and the Giants are also a good choice.
Yeah, on the opposite side of the spectrum, if you have a team that's playing against the Washington Commanders right now, I think you can bank on a lot of those offensive players to perform really well. I mean, even the Giants blew up. I mean, Neighbors had his huge game against the Commanders. So play your offensive skill players versus the Commanders. I think I just gave away that little secret there. Maybe it's not a secret at all, but we can see that happening. All right. So interesting to see top players, top cards in the top 20 lineups of week 2. Maybe not any major surprises there, but it's definitely interesting to see and talk through that data. But let's talk about an update to Smashup, because one of the things we want to do right now is we want to maintain balance, right? We don't want any one particular strategy to be overly dominant and continue to be dominant. In a lot of gaming platforms, it's called nerfing, right? Where developers will eliminate something that becomes either unfair or an overly weighted advantage to maintain balance and fair gameplay and maintain strategic consistency across the board. And so as a result, I think at Smashup here, we always obviously want to maintain a lot of balanced gameplay because that just makes it fun for everyone. So Hawk, can you talk through what we're seeing here in terms of pricing? Maybe talk through some of them. We don't have to talk through all the pricing, but we just wanted to display that and actually maybe discuss some of the pricing changes that we've included.
Yeah, and so let me just kind of directly address build on what you said and directly just address people watching this, which is that, it's not just about nerfing, but about balancing, right? And so
yeah,
what we saw is a lot of defensive stacking, partially because none of the defensive cards have trade-offs. The defensive cards are a bit cheaper. And we kind of debated. So what do we do? Do we raise the price of the defensive cards? I think what we ultimately settled on is, no, we want actually people to have more fun. We don't want to be overly restrictive with the cards. We don't want to make everything so expensive in an effort to find balance. You can play one fun card and you got to fill in with a bunch of little cheap cards. So we actually are going the opposite direction, which is we have a bunch of, I think, really fun, high-scoring cards for skill position players like receivers and tight ends and running backs and quarterbacks. And so what we're doing now is we're actually going the opposite direction, and we're going to lower the price of some of those cards. So I think what you're going to see here
They're on sale, baby. They're on sale.
On sale, fire sale. Come and get it.
That's right.
Catching Fire, Television of Love, Bruising Bell Cow. These are pretty popular cards. I've heard from people they like the mechanic, but I think if you see the graphic here, some of these were really, really expensive. Television of Love was $10,000. If you play that before, meant you could only play a $2,000 cards, which are not that power, right? So now that's pulled down, I believe, to
7,500. Yeah, 7,500.
Thank you. Catching Smoke, Catching Fire pulled down. Catching Fire being every catch is worth 3 points. Catching Smoke every reception is worth 2 points. Bruising Bell Cow every carry is worth a point. So a lot of really fun cards that you can actually stack on a running backs and receivers. So my guys, I think this week we're going to see a few more lineups that do a bunch of boomer bust cards going for points. A few more that stack onto their favorite receivers and running backs. But I don't know, Ming, looking at this, what would you do for your lineup with this kind of lower pricing?
Well, it's funny. I was just going to ask you, but one of the values that I see from these new prices, because I want to hear what your thoughts are too, but I love seeing Run CMC go from 5,000 to 2,500. That is a 50% discount off of a pretty significant card. I mean, Run CMC, it's not a card you can just apply to any running back, but a running back that gets 80 yards rushing and 40 yards receiving. I know that's not easy, but if you can apply that to someone that hits, I mean, that's not a big piece of your budget. That's not something that's going to be a huge gamble.
No card is named after anyone in particular.
That's right.
I could see why someone might think it's related to.
It's just a funny coincidence, but I could also see someone potentially really scoring off that if that could be something that hits maybe on a Breece Hall or something. I'm not sure what his total stats were tonight, but definitely in the future, that could be a Breece Hall card.
And that's what I'm thinking, right? It's like Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara is a good one, Saquon Barkley, can definitely get this. Bijan Robinson in the right weeks can get this. Maybe a James
Those are
Cook.
good. I mean, and again, it's not a huge gamble, right? You still got roughly 9,500 of your budget to apply towards the rest of your players. And if it doesn't hit, it doesn't kill you from a scoring standpoint because you've got $9,500 worth of your budget to apply towards other parts of your lineup. So that's a value that I see stands out. How about yourself? Like, what's a new card price and value that you see that is something you might use going forward?
Yeah, I think some of the all or nothing cards are really interesting to me too now. Like Unstoppable Freight Train dropping from 5 to 4.5, kind of the same thing. Actually, a really fun one too. Is then I'm sorry. So basically, stat like that and bell cow. You could take bell cow, you could take freight train, you could take run CMC. You could basically put them all on the same player, and or you could spread them out if you have players with different skills. But again, moving away from you can still stack on defense. That's still legit strategy, but now you've got I think more options, which is what really appeals to me.
Actually, bell cow 7,000 to 5,000. That's a pretty significant drop. And with bruising bell cow, like there's less risk, right? Because it's not an all or nothing. It's just points per carry, right? So if you can put it on someone that you know is going to be in a positive game script, is going to get a lot of carries throughout that day, is going to carry the ball 25 times, you just got 25 points and the value of that card went up in the sense that you're paying less, right? So only 5,000 for bruising bell cow.
Jordan Mason. We talked about this the other day, right? Jordan Mason, number 4 in snap share, number 1 in carries, number 1 in red zone carries. Pretty good card for him. And you could put something else on too. Get him at a cheap value, get him against a bad Rams defense. I don't want to give away all my lineups, but that may be a strategy I've employed a couple of times.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good call. Mason could be bruising bell cow this weekend versus the Rams.
So last thing here, you also notice a lot of the tight end cards have been pulled down in pricing too. So last year we had a few dominant tight ends; those got priced up a little bit with some of the the balancing. This year, tight ends have been struggling. Are there any tight ends you might think about playing the tight end cards on this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I mean it's been a rough year for tight ends, and it's like they're needy, and so we need to drop the prices down for them.
It is charity.
Cards for the poor, not alms for the poor. Cards for the poor.
Those tight ends have been loosened up. They're now loose ends.
Yeah, they are. Tight ends to play. I mean, we just talked about this in a previous pod episode, but Trey McBride is a good play this weekend. I think Brock Bowers is a good play. I would say Kittle. He was my first thought, but recent news today is that he sat out of practice, had groin tightness or hamstring tightness. I can't remember, but it's some soft tissue. There's a potential risk that he's going to miss this weekend's game. If the Niners didn't need any more injuries, there's one more along with like Travarius Ward too, who now is banged up too. So, that Sunday's game of the Rams.
He's done this. He's just trying to prove, like everyone's like, Brock has too many weapons. Brock is just taking down his weapons one by one just to get rid of all the haters.
Well, that Rams-Niners game is going to be like a preseason game this weekend. I'm not even sure if it's going to be watchable. You're like, who is that dude that's out there now? So, in any event,
one sneaky tight end here. I know we'll probably towards the end of wrapping up, but I believe that mark this down. It could be wrong, but a cheaper one you can get, who I think could actually have a really good week, is Dalton Kincaid. Been a little bit of a disappointment so far. Started playing really well last week. Game became a blowout, so the game script went against him in the second half. Cook had a long touchdown. The defense came through. I've got a sneaky feeling that this week against the Jaguars could be the week where Allen and Kincaid have their kind of first big game together.
I mean, I hope so. I have a bunch of Kincaid shares. I know you do too. Is that a sneaky pick though? I mean, he came into the season. I know he hasn't been playing well like a lot of tight ends, but he came in as like a top 5 tight end of the season. So he wasn't like flying under any radar. He's just been playing poorly.
In the sense he has not been playing well. And I think I'm saying, it's one thing to pick a player, say, oh, Kincaid's a little cheaper, I'm going to pick him so I can get a more expensive player elsewhere. But to put cards on him, I'm saying Kincaid could be a guy you get on the cheap, and you could put like a all-pro tight end, you could put anti-hero on him, you could stack a couple of cards, and if he goes off, this is the week him and Allen go off, not only do you get those points, but another strategic concept here is picking against the chalk being the most popular player. So if not a lot of people are stacking on Kincaid, and you do, if he misses, you're not going to win the weekly tournament. But if he hits, other people have stacked on him, that could be one of those plays that vaults you to the top.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, it'll be interesting to see with these new prices if we see a higher volume of cards being put on tight ends. I know right now people are really scared of putting any cards on tight ends because they're just not performing at this moment. So, all right, that wraps up our conversation around the pricing and actually just wraps up discussion around cards player insights, card player combo insights. Any other last thoughts on this data that we have from week 2?
Maybe the main thing is we kind of did a little mini run through of the data, but if you found this interesting and you want to find out more, we have another podcast, not by us, Haibo Does Data, where Haibo, Owen, and Rohit really go in depth, like 45 minutes going through all the data. So if you found this little amuse bouche to be interesting and our sort of entertaining pod style, and you want to like dive deeper and really get to see it, go check out the other pod. Really interesting stuff. So I'll put a little plug for that here.
For sure. Yeah, check that out. We definitely love checking that out. It inspired us to do a little insights review as well. So if this is something that y'all like, then maybe we'll do more of this on our pod too. And we'll dive in amongst our other bullshit we talk through. So we'll incorporate it all.
All right. So should I tell them how to come find us then?
All right, Hawk. Let's wrap it up like we always do. Tell them how they can continue to follow along.
All right. Subscribe on whatever podcast software you're listening to or on YouTube. Go to smashupsports.com, register today. Free weekly tournament, season-long league, and single-player campaign, the first of its kind, coming in the next couple of weeks. I then go to other social media like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. You can find us at Smashup Sports. And otherwise, I think, Ming, we are...
All right. We out. See y'all later.
I'm going to go play some loose ends.